Welcome to yet another SmartQA Musings, which is just a general flurry of interesting thoughts. Today, what I want to muse about and is inspired by a conversation that we had in the last week's coaching session, where one of the participants really asked, "Hey, I'm trying to shift to SmartQA as part of the coaching, and when I talk about it to my peers, to my supervisor, well, they aren't so forthcoming. Sometimes it's a hurdle. And what do I do? What do you think we can do?" Now, this question has been asked many, many times when I talk about doing things smartly, maybe driven by a methodology and so on. So I thought, okay, here's another gentleman asking me some interesting questions, and that's how it started. So the title of this musing, therefore, is the SmartQA shift from being the doer, from doing to influencing. How do I do it? So ultimately, when we all want to improve, how can I do that? And I think it takes two parts, right? One, it's shift my thinking, my mindset. And then, of course, transform my activities, my doing. So the question then becomes, is it just me? Can I just change my mindset and somehow practice a different doing? And therefore, can I go off on a path of improvement? And the answer is yes. To improve, I can change my mindset. But in a large system, I'm not really alone. And therefore, if I implement some things, maybe it's a new idea, maybe it's maybe trying out a new tool, or maybe it's a modification of a process, maybe it's improving the practice. To implement these, I certainly need support of others, and therefore, it's not just me alone. And therefore, let's take a look as to what do we do when, in a larger context, in a larger organization, I'm not alone. Now, let's look at what the shift means. The shift towards probably a smarter way of doing things is an improvement via probably three major things. The way I do my personal practice, the way the organization governance is, and therefore improvement of the organization governance as a process, or where we embrace tools and use those tools for enabling process, enabling my doing, so the tools. So therefore, the shift to the SmartQA is really improvement via three things: the practice, which is personal, the process, which is organizational, and the tools, which connect to both. Some which help process implementation, some which helps my personal activities. And therefore, shifting to SmartQA isn't just about refining what we do, what I do. It's also about influencing others and how others see quality. So I just can't do what I like to do and therefore push it on, because it requires a we component, and that's where it sometimes becomes a challenge, because the process may hinder the practice. The tools may not be very well aligned to some of the things that we are doing. And of course, the people's mindset and the way they think could be different. And there are different people and different stakeholders. And therefore, there is a need to convince others to embrace. So then the question becomes, okay, how to convince others to embrace newer ideas to help us do SmartQA? So to answer this question, I want to ask a leading question, and that is, convince whom? Is it my manager, my engineering manager, my project kind of a manager, my head of a business, or my peers in testing, my folks in development, and if I'm maybe a service kind of a company, my customer, my account manager, customer, etc. So there are different people who have to be, in some sense, get aligned for me to implement improvement and therefore make the system more smarter. So it's not about just me embracing a new methodology, setting up a new tool, changing the process. Quite obviously, that won't work. And so when there are different sets of folks whom I need to convince, what I need to realize is each one has a different set of goals. Each one have a different set of goals to meet, and therefore each one of them needs different information to be convinced. And if I am not able to come up with good reasons and good information which supports the different goals, then probably I'm not going to be as successful in implementing improvements, driving a transformation, and therefore personally benefiting from the change. So let's ask ourselves, so what do different people need? What does each one feel strong about? What is it they value? This may not be the most comprehensive list, but I've tried to put what I thought was the top of my mind and top of the things that I've seen over many decades. So to an engineering manager, I think it's all about high quality, higher speed, lower cost, and maybe some innovation. So that's what they value. So if whatever practices, processes, tools, we're trying to implement, I guess they're going to ask questions to find out how it meets these. When you look at it from a project manager, I think one of the things they worry about seriously is low risk. They don't want something to be upsetting the apple cart. They want, obviously, high quality, higher speed, lower cost, because that's a standard triad. But what they're really worried about is they don't want to add new risk. They don't want to change a process. They don't want to suddenly put a new tool. They don't want to change a practice because it just might cause a possible delay, a newer risk, obviously. So they just want it to be less. They don't want to upset the apple cart largely, right? Look at the business head, somebody who's really not connected to the engineering part of it, but they're outward facing to the market, to the customers, responsible for revenue. They value the most important thing, the business value. How does it help my business? How does it help me sell more? How does it reduce, how does it improve my profit? So, because after all, at the end of the day, we are really looking at it from revenue and profit. And finally, how does it improve my standing from a notion of innovation? So that's what they probably feel strong about. When you look at us as testers and our peers in testing, what they really want, probably one of them is, how does it improve my personal capability? How does it improve my resume? So if I've got a new tool, well, I guess I'm more happier to try it out, right? So it kind of improves my learning and CV enhancement. Other than that, of course, I would love to not be bogged down with more work. In fact, I would value if whatever changes that you did would help me lower my effort, lessen my work, and deliver higher quality. Because that's what I think I'm, in a way, striving for. And those are the ones I think they probably would value. Whereas the dev folks, they're always wary about the fact if you're doing something from the context of quality, I don't want it to take more effort or more time because I'm already struggling to build my code. So obviously things that come up really well, really sharp is, I just want it to not add up to more work, which is less, therefore, anything that is related to lesser effort and lower effort and lesser work. Of course, anything that helps me speed up the delivery and still deliver great code because I don't want to keep on fixing bugs and regress and stuff like that. And of course, finally, what does the customer want? Quite similar to what the business head probably was wanting. Innovation, value, and of course, highest quality, because that's his expectation or her expectation. So why did we go through this stuff? Because I think it's important to understand the needs and, in a way, expectations of different stakeholders in this journey if we want to embrace, if you want to embark upon any meaningful transformation to help us do better. So having set a bit of a context of different stakeholders and what does each one of them value, how do I go about convincing them? Because I'm no more an individual doer. I slowly have to become an influencer in the organization. I have to become a leader and therefore drive transformation and therefore benefit from the transformation. First, certainly as an individual, and certainly we as a collective, the team, the organization, and again, later, of course, the community. So what can be modes to convince? Well, it can be by, explaining potential of what we're trying to do. Hey, if we change this practice, if you modified this process a bit, if we embraced a slightly better tool or customized this tool differently, by explaining some details, it could be one way of doing it. Or it could be by demonstrating potential by doing a small pilot. Now, what's important to kind of keep in mind is explanation is great if you're talking to your peers because they want details. But if you're going to be talking to probably engineering managers and business heads and customers, they probably don't have the kind of patience and time to understand your detailed explanation. They want demonstration. They want proof. They don't want the details. They just want numbers, like my colleague said. So one way is to kind of say, hey, let me give you more information and explain how this is better, convince you, or I just do a pilot, I demonstrate the potential in a smaller context, and then say, do you think we can scale? The other ways that could be there is also create excitement, to say, hey, this is something interesting, this is something creative, this is something innovative, very different from the state thing that we're doing, and therefore create some excitement. Or it could be showcasing real work. So the difference between demonstration and showcasing is you have actually got a full-fledged implementation, and you say, hey, at the end of this particular release, let me share with you some interesting data. So it's like the first cut case study, so to speak, right? Whereas a potential is more like a smaller pilot. And therefore, one is to appeal to the emotional side of things in terms of an excitement. And the other one is a little more factual in terms of showing actual work and results in comparison with what we did earlier. And that leads into a very important idea that we need to focus on results, not the activities. It's not about demonstrating how cool the activities are or how short the activities are, how much more detailed the activities are, which are interesting. But then I think what people really want most of the time is results. It's not about the doing, right? And we as engineers more often are always enthusiastic, interested, want to show more information about activities that we do and say how cool it is, how innovative it is, how nice it is, and so on. But the hard-nosed upper echelons of people, so to speak, like managers and customers and so on, they are really interested in results, the outcomes. So convincing can be from multiple angles. It can be explanations and education. It can be by demonstration rather than just preach. It can be to create an excitement in people and enable them embracing. Or it can be actually showcasing work and keeping in mind that it's all, at the end of the day, it's about results and not just activities. So any transformation requires us, or any improvement requires us from us to shift from being a doer, being an influencer, to being a leader. And this is all about asking. And then the question here is how can I put them all together? Having understood there are different stakeholders, different expectations, different ways to convince. So how do I jam them all together? One, don't see a problem. If you see a problem, then you're going to go to solve. So instead of being a whiner of the problem, you're seeing yourself as an implementer of a solution, which is what good managers say, right? So don't come to me with a problem. Come to me with an idea, a solution. So if I want to influence, if I want to lead, I cannot complain about the problem, but I have to see a solution, which I think we understand very well. It's the shift in terms of looking at all the details to seeing the larger picture. As implementers, as doers, as engineers, we all love to get the higher degree of detail. How is it done? When is it done? Who does it? What are the various steps? But then I think what people want to see before they embark upon an unknown is to see the big picture and really appreciate whether the big picture is in consonance with what their product deliverables are. So rather than talking too much about the details, maybe it's important to kind of show the bigger picture and hopefully present a much more stronger, rosy, exciting, bigger picture before we do, and not bog them down to details because they may not get it. Yes, we all like to be logical, we like to be factual, we like to give a lot of data, we like to convert that into information, present it in gory detail, if you will. But we are humans, right? And humans react better to emotions. So it's not just about logic that matters. It's not just about facts that matter. It's about, in a way, helping them see something more deeper, something that they can connect with. And therefore, if I can look at transformations and drive changes where I connect to them emotionally and not just factually, then that's an important shift to keep in mind if I want to move from being a doer to being an influence, be it within the company, within a team, or within the community at large. At the end of the day, what we do as activities is bound to become boring, staid. We end up doing the same things. How do you make that exciting? And that's again, continuing on from the last time of being factual to emotional. We're trying to kind of say, look, I'm appealing to your instincts and therefore convert that whole idea of, standard boring stuff to something more interesting and exciting so that they bite. And what we talked about last, that it's not about activities, it's not about actions, but it's about the benefit. So we talked about activities to outcomes, right? What it really means is the benefit. So how does it help us? Does it help us do less work? Does it help us do faster work? Does it help us deliver better quality? Does it help us become more innovative and creative and be ready for the new age? As we talked about, different people have different expectations. What is benefit to a manager may not be the benefit to, let's say, a test folk or a development folk. Each of them see different benefits. But at the end of the day, they have to tie in to a business benefit of faster, cheaper, better, right? So somewhere, if the benefit is not coming out clearly, despite all that stuff, it's kind of hard to be able to influence and make the change. So having seen in some, having kind of talked about what could be some things that help us shift from a doer to influencer, the final step is, what does it really take to influence and ultimately effect a change in a system, be it in the team or be it in the larger context of multiple teams of a company via maybe a center of excellence in your company, so to speak, depending on what kind of companies you work with, or it could be the marketplace itself. One, it could be by what we understand very clearly. It's about fundamentally a transformation of mindset. That's what we started off. It's about saying, look, I can't ultimately do some things, I can't influence and change if I am still sticking to the same stuff. I need to have a fresh set of thinking. Some bit of transformation happens. It has to happen in my head. And this transformation of a mindset is probably the first thing that has to happen. And I can transform, but I need to be able to communicate this transformation, implement this transformation, and communicate about how it is going. And that's why to be able to facilitate that entire process, I need to probably change some vocabulary so that I become more sharper, more clearer. And sometimes, languages and vocabularies have a strong play. But once once we are on the same plane, once we understand well, once both of us understand what we need to do, after that, the vocabulary is okay. The languages don't matter. But otherwise, if I'm continuing to use the same vocabulary in the language, then the problem is I may not be able to communicate what I'm trying to do in terms of a change sharply and clearly. So first, transformation, and second, I like the notion of vocabulary change. Third, any aids are useful. Maybe it's some checklist, maybe it's a utility, maybe it's some tool customization. Whatever aids that are there, make it simple, make it intelligent, so that people can afford, people can try it and use it and therefore benefit. Right? And when we give aids and people try it, look at it as minor improvements, tiny improvements on a daily basis. No such thing as all of them have to come at one shot, right? And therefore look at tiny improvements periodically. And do little improvements as appropriate to the given context. Anything more is there? Yep, evolve. The notion of change to implement smarter ways of doing things is not a one-shot exercise. It evolves over time, over many, many increments before it takes root and hopefully delivers value. Should I be rigid? Should I push it hard? Should I be very purist? No, just have enough structure. The guy who probably has everything clear in his head or her head and does this is a purist. But in reality, people understand some things, people apply to a particular context, they will apply it with a certain amount of rough edges. So don't be a purist. Just use enough structure so that people can try it. You're not changing anything instantly. You're retrofitting it, you're slowly morphing it, and that's what we need to do. So if you're trying to kind of look at it from, I need to improve coverage and therefore look at some design or thinking of how to design, and if you say, hey, here is an important, interesting practice that we should try out, then retrofit that activity of design with some of the ideas that you have, be it related to practice, be it related to process, or be it aided by a tool, and retrofit some existing activities, do a little, try it out a little, see some benefits, and then build on it. And there may be 20 things that you might need to do the overall improvement. Are you going to try all because you learned a new philosophy, you learned a new tool, you learned a new process model? Do I need to apply? No, you don't. You just need to do what is appropriate to your business. And therefore, the act of, to shift from a doer to influence and be able to effect these changes, these might be some interesting ideas to keep in mind. Ultimately, why are we doing all this? Why are we transforming? Well, because we want to be better. And what does better mean? It could mean being more effective. It could mean being more consistent. It could also mean being more efficient. So effective has a bearing on the final quality. Consistency has a bearing on the repeatability. Efficiency has a bearing on time and cost and resource. Now, where do we focus? Okay, we do a variety of activities. We try to do in variety of ways by which I can convince and try to do. Where should I focus? First, focus on effectiveness. Let it do a better job. Then try to repeat it so that it becomes consistent. And then try to optimize and then be efficient. Any kind of reversal will be troublesome. So it's far more easier and far more sensible to try to improve the outcomes by being more effective. And then ensure that it is not a one-time story, that it can run multiple times. It can be repetitive. You can repeat it a few times. And that's where consistency comes in. And finally, I would love to optimize. I would like to do it faster, cheaper, better, lessen the number of steps. And that's where efficiency comes into picture. As you might have noticed a connection, we talked about process, we talked about practice, we talked about tools. All these are typically the means to improve it. You might connect that practices, good individual practices, have a more stronger connect to effectiveness. Good processes have a stronger connect to consistency. Great tools have a connection to certainly efficiency, consistency, and effectiveness. But more often, we tout a tool in the context of efficiency. Right? So there is some reasonably interesting relationship between the means and the outcomes. In this case, the outcomes being effectiveness, consistency, and efficiency. And that's where we started off. We started off from saying, hey, that's where the shift is. And to make the shift, it's not just me alone, unless I'm a one-man company. It is about shifting and influencing others. And influencing doesn't stop within your team or company, because all of us, in our own way, in some sense, are influencing and selling ideas to the community at large via posts, via blogs, via conferences, via books, in whatever form or fashion. So all of us are constantly trying to improve ourselves and the world around us. Thank you so much.